Well, hello, Canadian Campaholic here with a video log update for you guys. It is November 13th now, 2020, and it is cold outside. It is only about 33 degrees Fahrenheit, or just a little bit above freezing, and tonight it's supposed to go down below freezing for good solid 4 or 5 hours. So I'm heading out to the storage location, and I'm going to re-winterize the plumbing on our camper. We winterized the plumbing originally about 2 or 3 weeks ago because we had a cold spell. And then we actually went camping this past weekend, and I flushed everything out of the system with fresh water, refilled the hot water tank, and we camped as normal. To share a little bit about that camping experience, we had unusually warm conditions here in Canada. It got up close to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, or up around 20 degrees Celsius. It was beautiful weather, but it was probably one of the worst camping trips I've ever had, and this is where my rant comes in. We had, on 3 sides of us, there were 3 campsites on 3 sides of our campsite. There must have been, between those 3 campsites, in excess of 60 people. Whether or not they were all actually staying on those sites or not, none of my business. But not only was there so many of them, but they were, first of all, I'm just going to say it, they were white trash. Maybe that's inappropriate and offensive to say it, but they were. They really were. They were white trash. Shout talking the entire time. I know I'm too loud, I know I talk too much, but this was insane. They had their music cranked the entire time, full volume, all drinking and hollering and carrying on. Their kids thought it was a great idea to shove water bottles in between the back tire and the frame of their bike, so we had the racket of these brats riding around on their bikes all day. And don't get me wrong, I mean, if you want to have a few beers and have a few laughs at a campsite, you want to listen to some tunes, that's fine, but in moderation. A provincial park is not a party place. It's not a place for you to go to hang out and crank the stereo and have a good old time. People go to provincial parks, and I'm sure it's probably true of state parks in the States, at least I hope, to enjoy peace and tranquility, to enjoy nature. We have camped at this campground, which is one of the most popular and busy in all of Ontario. We've camped there April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, even in the height of the season when the place is full of college and university students, not to stereotype, but they like to party. We've never had this level of noise and aggravation. And at one point, they were all on one campsite. So 60 some odd people on one campsite. Hello? There's a goddamn pandemic. What are you doing all on one site? That's not social distancing. So anyway, it was a huge nuisance. The fact that the camping season started so late, and the fact that the weather was so nice also meant that the park was overrun with day use visitors, which meant that all of the hiking trails, the fishing spots, everything was super crowded. And again, if you're going to social distance, follow the rules the government's setting out for COVID-19, it's very hard to do that when it was so busy. So a little bit of a disappointing weekend. When we go camping in November, there's only about 100 sites open at this particular park. It's Pinery. And usually of those sites, there's usually only 10 or 11 that are actually occupied. And I've said this in previous videos, but most people that stay at Pinery at that time of year are your true diehard campers. Usually it's kind of cold, a little bit damp, and they're only really interested in enjoying nature, what's left of it, and enjoying a nice sit around the campfire. And the icing on the cake for me was that my son and we like to go for walks at night to look at the stars and wander around the campsites at night. That sounds creepy. But an evening walk, let's just say. And there were large areas of the campground where it was quite peaceful. We just, unfortunately, luck of the draw, ended up in a spot that wasn't that great. And these folks kind of reminded me of the kind of party animals we used to encounter at one of the local RV parks. Probably people that wouldn't normally go to a provincial park, but again, everything's closed. It was unusually nice, and so I understand. And I have nothing against RV parks. I have nothing against people wanting to have a good time. I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a time and a place for it, and everything in moderation. They were being pretty inconsiderate, if you ask me. So the plan for us is I'm going to go over to the trailer and re-winterize the plumbing here, and I'll show you guys a little bit about that. And then my son and I actually might take the trailer out again sometime this month, if we get a relatively dry weekend, and actually do one last camping trip to kind of make up for things. I don't think my wife wants to go again. She was pretty frustrated with the noise, so she'll probably stay home with my daughters and hang out and have a girls' weekend, and my son and I will probably go out to the trailer and take it out for one last hurrah, if you will. I normally wouldn't camp this late into November when I was still working before losing my job due to COVID. I wouldn't have had the money right now to camp, and I would have been saving all my PTO for Christmas. But we've already paid for all of our camping, and one more trip we can easily afford that, and I'm off right now looking for new work, so why not, right? My idea basically is, as long as it's dry or relatively dry, we'll go camping. I won't go if it's going to be freezing cold and pouring with rain the entire time. There's no point. But if there's the odd shower and it's not too freezing cold, we could still make the best of it. And then after that, of course, we'll finish the winterization process. We'll take all of the cushions and the mattresses and the curtains and all that junk out of the trailer. We'll redo our anti-rodent protocols, put the damp rid in it, and shut the trailer down for the winter. It'll be the winter hiatus. It's crazy to think the season's pretty much wrapped up already, but when you figure it didn't really get started till late June, we lost a lot of time. But you know what? It was a good season, and I feel very thankful that my family were healthy enough, despite the pandemic, to even enjoy camping. I'm thankful that we had paid for pretty much all of our camping prior to me losing my job. I know there's a lot of people that couldn't afford to go out, and my heart goes out to them. So pretty darn good season overall, I would say. And looking forward to planning next year. It's going to be a little difficult to plan next year because I don't know what my new job is going to look like. I don't know, how easy it's going to be to get time off. So it's going to make things a little harder to plan for next year. But anyway, I'm rambling now, so I'm going to shut up. We're going to transition over to the storage lot, and let's go winterize this plumbing. All right, well, we got the battery hooked up, and we got the lights on in the camper and the furnace running to warm things up inside. But before we do the work of winterizing inside, I'm going to come out here, start the process. I've kind of covered this process and talked about it on the channel before, but I figured it's been a while, so might as well show some folks again. So what I like to do is I like to come down here and open up the low point drains, because I want to get as much water out of the plumbing as possible. And again, I have a small camper. It's only about 22 feet long. And so draining the water out of the low point drains is very useful for me, because my hands are wet, so it's a little hard to unscrew this one. There's not a lot of plumbing, not a lot of pipes, but locate the low point drain on your camper and open up both the hot and the cold. And I do this because, like I said, I don't have a huge amount of piping to work with. Small kitchen, small bathroom. And this just eliminates as much water as possible from the system, so that when you pump the antifreeze through it, you're increasing the likelihood that you've got good concentrated antifreeze. You don't want that antifreeze diluted at all. RV techs will sometimes blow the lines out with compressed air, and in some cases they won't even put antifreeze in it because the compressed air dries things out enough they don't need to. In other cases, they'll do the compressed air first to try to eliminate any water in the system and then run antifreeze. I'm not doing any of that with compressed air. I'm just doing this myself, and I've done it this way for several years. Many years actually, on pop-ups and on this camper. Never had a pipe split or any issues. So that's the first thing. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 1 1/16 inch socket, and I'm going to open up my hot water tank, lead the pressure off first, just in case. I didn't do that once and the anode rod shot out at me. Just the pressure of the water bouncing around inside the camper was enough. So anyway, pull the pressure release valve. Make sure you've drained the pressure off. Get your giant ass 1 1/16 inch socket. We're going to pop it there onto the anode rod and drain the hot water tank. If you have an Atwood system follow your user manual. I don't know how to drain an Atwood system. This is a Suburban hot water heater, so it's got the anode rod or the drain plug. And we're going to drain it out. All right, so we've loosened it off. Just going to give it a couple more turns with the wrench, or the socket I should say, and then I'm going to manually unscrew it the rest of the way. I've got Teflon tape on there and cleaned up the threads recently, so that makes it easier. Take that rod out, inspect the rod. This one's fairly new, it's in pretty good shape, and yeah, we don't need to replace that yet. Still got lots of meat on there. So that's going to drain out completely. And now we're going to go inside and we're going to bypass the hot water heater. And we're going to prep the freshwater pump to start pumping through. Now don't actually pump anything through until your low point drains are done, because if you turn the pump on, it's just going to piss antifreeze out of this pipe here. So let this all drain out and then we'll move on to the next step. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bypass my hot water heater, and the idea here is that you don't want to have to fill your 5 or 6 gallon water heater with antifreeze. You want to bypass it. So again, I've shown this in previous videos, but here's the cold line coming in, and normally the hot water would come out of the top of the tank. We're going to use these 2 valves and we're going to turn them, and that'll basically create a loop so that the water just, or in this case antifreeze, completely bypasses the system. Something I'll do later is I will refresh my cloves and my mint. This is kind of a sidebar, but I've had some folks commenting recently on my video about keeping mice out of your trailer, that, you know, cloves don't work and mint doesn't work, dryer sheets don't work, it'll attract mice. You do you. I'm no expert, but I'll tell you that as long as the cloves are fresh and the mint's fresh, I don't get mice in here. The minute they dry out and start to wear out, I get mice. Case in point, when we did the initial plumbing winterization a few weeks ago, I opened up this panel and sure enough, I had a dead mouse in the trap. And in my humble opinion, it's because the cloves have dried out, the mint is no longer working. This stuff's all in here from last winter. All I know is I don't have 100% proof it works, but it just seems a weird coincidence to me that when the smell wears off, I end up getting a mouse. But even so, the trap is necessary with the peanut butter, and in this case it saved the day. So, all right, I'm going to trigger that trap, not because it'll hurt me, but it always scares the bejesus out of me when I go to do something in here and the trap goes off. But for me, it's just a simple case, and these are a little bit stiff, of reaching in and twisting these valves to the bypass position. This one on the bottom is always a little bit of a bitch to move it. It's a little bit tough. But there we go. Turn it all the way around. So now I've created that loop so that when I run the pump in a few minutes, it'll pump that antifreeze all the way through here, completely bypass this tank, which will now be empty, and push it through the rest of the hot system. So that is bypassing your hot water heater. Every hot water heater is going to be a little bit different. Look at your user manual, but that's the general concept. So here's my setup. First of all, I like to buy a really good RV water system antifreeze. Again, you can't use regular antifreeze. You got to use something that's designed for cottages, campers, pools, boats, things like that. This is winterproof. I'm not sponsored by them. I bought this myself. This thing was almost full, and that's about how much I used last time when I winterized a few weeks ago. So what's left in this container is more than enough to do the little bit of plumbing I have in this camper. You don't want to cheap out on the antifreeze that you use. This is about $13, $14 Canadian at a local retailer for this size jug. You can buy some that are about half the size and for $2 or $3, but I don't want to cheap out on something like this. You want to make sure that it doesn't expand at all when it freezes, because here's the thing. RV antifreeze will still freeze when it gets cold enough, but the key thing is it will not expand. It's that expansion that busts the PEX plumbing, the plastic pipes. So I've got a jug of this, and then I've got this tubing, which I got from Home Depot, and this adapter. I don't know how well you can see that, but it just basically goes into the end of the vinyl hose, and then that little piece screws on to the fresh water tank where you saw me take the hose off, And that allows me to easily put the end of this tube into the bottle, turn on the pump up here on the control panel, and then I start at the farthest end of the trailer, which in this case is the toilet, and I will basically put my foot on the flush until I see lovely pink stuff running into the toilet, and I'll let that run for 2 or 3 seconds. I don't want to waste it, but I want to make sure that there's a good flow of antifreeze. You should also leave some antifreeze in the bottom of the toilet to make sure that the seal doesn't dry out. I'll then run the shower hot and cold, make sure there's lots of pink coming out of it. It's also good to put a few cupfuls down the drain so the P-trap in the shower is protected. And then last but not least, I'll run antifreeze through the tap again on the hot and cold side. Run it, make sure that it's pink. But anyway, enough talking. Let's get it all hooked up and show you exactly what I do. Alright, so I went outside, made sure the low point drain plugs were back on, put the anode rod back in the hot water tank. I've come inside and I've attached my hose to the pump. Make sure that it's all lined up and you don't strip the threads. And also it's hand tight only. If you strip the threads, you're probably going to need a new pump, or at least a new part. It's all plastic, so be gentle. I've stuck the other end of the hose into the jug, right down at the bottom, so we get nothing but antifreeze. I'm going to clear some of this crap out of my sink here, and I'm going to come up to the panel, and I'm going to switch my water pump on, and that's going to draw the antifreeze into the pump and prime the pump. So there it goes, straight into the pump. It's going to go through the lines, and that's it. All right, so we're not done, but it's already ready to go. So I'm going to go back to the bathroom now. I'll start at the toilet, because again, this is the furthest point in the system. There's fresh water in there for now, so I'm going to put my foot on the pedal. Run that. There we go. There's the antifreeze, nice and pink. And that's good enough. You don't want to waste it, because it's going to chug it and empty that jug on you. But I ran it till it was nice and pink. You could go just a little bit longer if you wanted to. But notice I made sure that I had antifreeze in the bottom there to protect the seal over the course of the winter. But that's, again, look at that, nice and pink. That's good. And there won't really be any water in there, and it won't be diluted because we took the time to drain the low point drains outside. To the shower now, which is full of junk at the moment. Let me clear this up a bit. I'm going to try and do this one-handed, but I'm going to take the nozzle off here. And I'm going to aim the nozzle at the drain so that as the pink stuff comes out, it's going down the P-trap. So 2 birds with 1 stone. So we'll switch on the cold side first. Okay, there's the water coming out. There we go. Nice solid pink, which, there we go. A little hard to see in this light, but that's nice and pink. Switch that off. I said switch it off. We still got a decent amount in the jug. We just got to be careful here. Next time I do this, I'll have a full jug. Okay, now we'll do the hot side. Oh, Jesus, I'm getting it everywhere. But again, make sure there's no air, make sure there's no water. And yep, she's nice and pink. Let it run for a second. Use the pause button, Dan. Come on. There we go. So now we've run antifreeze through the hot and cold on the shower. The shower head's got some antifreeze in it, and there's more than enough going down into that drain. And I'll get my squeegee out here in a minute and clean up this this mess. Okay. Last but not least, the kitchen. So same thing, we'll start with the cold side. There's the water. A little bit left in the system, and there's the nice pink. Beautiful. All right, and then the hot side. So yeah, there we go. Nice and pink. Let it run for a minute. Protect that P-trap. Let's go to the cold side one more time. Beautiful. So yeah, draining the low point, I mean, it doesn't eliminate all the water, but it certainly reduces the amount. And now I know I've got nothing but pure antifreeze running through there, which is fantastic. So if I was going to stop camping at this point, that would be it. The plumbing would, in terms of plumbing, it would be protected. One little tip I'll give you, bring yourself a towel, because when you go down there to unscrew that hose, Not the entire pump, but a large portion of the antifreeze that's in the pump is going to drain out all over the floor, so be careful. And also be careful that you don't drop the end of the hose, because then everything that's in the hose is also going to piss all over the floor. So not a lot left in this jug, certainly not enough to re-winterize, but if you buy another jug, you could top it off with this. The rest of the winterization process we're not going to cover in this video, but anyway, I hope that was helpful. Just a quick and dirty explanation of winterizing the plumbing. So that'll about wrap things up here for this video. As I mentioned earlier, the plan is for my son and I, if we can get away with it, to still enjoy a weekend, one last weekend to make up for the last one. What we would do at the campsite is we would once again open those low point drains, and we would drain all of the antifreeze out. It's non-toxic, but if you want, you can drain it into a container so you're not pouring it all over your campsite. But you got to get as much of that antifreeze out of the system. Plug things back up. Reverse the bypass procedure to engage the hot water tank, and then basically just fill the holding tank and run the water through the system until there's no more pink. You will get a little bit of an aftertaste probably for your first trip, so you can bring a Brita water filter or any kind of water purification device that you like, or just bring bottled water for the first little bit and maybe just do dishes with it. I suppose the other option is just forget about the plumbing altogether and just bring bottled water and maybe a big 5-gallon jug and use the on-site bathroom facilities. But with COVID, I'd kind of like the convenience of using my own bathroom. So this process from start to finish, if I wasn't explaining it, would take me no more than 15 minutes. The antifreeze, like I said, is about 15 bucks. I think the hose was maybe $5. I don't know what the adapter would cost. I was given it generously by the RV dealer. But yeah, if it means you can squeeze a little bit more out of an already short camping season, why wouldn't you? Anyway, regardless of where you are, I hope you're happy, healthy, and safe. I hope that you had a great 2020 camping season, and hopefully you can start planning for 2021, and hopefully that will be a better camping season. But for now, we'll talk to you later.